Oh, thank you, Emily. Great. So before we talk about the Digital Equity Act, we have some updates related to the FCC's Learn Without Limits initiative. First of all, tomorrow we are hosting a webinar in partnership with Urban Libraries Council and COSLA and ARSL about the E-rate hotspots program. It's tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern. I just dropped the registration link in the chat. There's still time to register. Please come. There will be a couple of our E-rate experts there to talk about the program guidelines, and then Alex Half from the Baltimore County Public Library and CJ Forrest from the Rowan County Public Library. So like a large system versus a small rural one location library to talk about how they lend hotspots, how they're thinking about the E-rate hotspot program, and take some of our questions. So please come if you're thinking about that, if you're interested in that program. Would love to have you. Related to that, the FCC also put out a further notice with the E-rate hotspots program. So ALA will be responding to that. Comments are due on October 4th. The comments or the questions of this time are mainly about kind of procedural things, like should they put a 21-day cap on how long they can be loaned? What kinds of parameters should they put on it? They're still looking at kind of cost effectiveness and waste, fraud, and abuse concerns. We're planning to just put in a pretty short response saying like, let's see how the program goes first before we put any additional guidelines in. But if anyone has thoughts on that or has been following, please reach out to me. We'd be happy to take into consideration any promising practices from your program or any concerns that you have about those questions. Yeah, and then we're also monitoring, you may have seen that the hotspots lending program was challenged. So we're monitoring that to see what next steps those are. As of now, that we've heard the FCC is just planning to roll out the program as usual, and try not to worry about that. So we are, as we of course, providing the guidance and moving forward, but keep you aware of any changes related to the legal challenges. Also within the Learn Without Limits, the cybersecurity pilot program application window opened last week through November 1st. If you're considering that, it's $200 million for a 3-year pilot for schools and libraries. You can apply now. We have a number of resources for you that I will drop in the chat. Some resources related to applying for the cybersecurity pilot. You have time to do that. We're probably not doing our own webinar about that, but Shelby just had one a week ago. That's really good. And I just linked to that, so you could check that out. And then USAC has an upcoming one in October. And then finally, more legal challenges. You probably heard we probably talked about last time. The Universal Service Fund overall was challenged in the Fifth Circuit Court. We are monitoring that and likely will do some kind of intervener or amicus brief in that case. The FCC was granted a stay by the court, so that's in effect now, which means the programs can continue as normal. But we are concerned about that. And of course, the next step is to go to the Supreme Court. And we know that this Supreme Court doesn't always do what we hope that they will do. So I think there are still some concerns that the USF is under threat. Yeah, so that's what we know for now, but let me know if there are specific questions. Emily, do you want to talk about just the short update on our Digital Equity Act grant?
Sure. So yesterday, the Digital Equity Act competitive grant applications were due. ALA submitted our application, and we're gonna have a debrief here in a minute to talk more about thoughts and processes about the whole application process. Yeah, so excited to learn more about how folks felt the process went. And then I can drop in, just so folks know, we record all of our meetings, so I can drop in our YouTube page. So if you need to reference any of our discussions for the future. And then I can pass it back to Megan.
Great. I think just one final thing before we kick off our discussion. Emily and I are attending the Shelby Conference next week. It's Wednesday through Friday in Crystal City, Arlington, Virginia, and wanted to see if anyone's going to be there. Yes, Michelle, Stacy, exciting. James, what about you? James is usually, I usually see James' name there.
My travel budget is tied up with the federal government with no continuing resolution yet. Hopefully that will be signed by next week. We'll see.
Okay, fingers crossed. That would be a silly reason to miss that. Donna, was that a thumbs up? Yes, we'll see you there.
Yes.
Awesome. Liz, what about you? I usually see you there too.
Yeah, I'll be there. I'm excited to see everybody.
Woohoo. Cool. Okay. Well, if you'll be there, or if your colleagues will be there, let them know to say hi. But hope to see you in Arlington next week. Okay. Well, with that, we mentioned we'll be talking about the Digital Equity Act competitive grant today. Many of us submitted yesterday. There's been a lot of interest from this group and just kind of all of the grant programs and the whole process and what's next, what it means for libraries going forward. So we'll debrief some of that a little bit, and we have Ann Slaughter and Bo Ford here today to facilitate that conversation. So I'll turn it over to Bo and Ann. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Bo, do you want to start or you want me to go?
I'll start because I want to get into the questions that you feel are appropriate. So, Bo Ford here with the New Mexico State Library. I've been in this seat since October last year. So, approaching a year, we've got our Digital Equity Summit on Friday. So, imagine planning a summit. We've got 85 registrants for the summit, so that's a win for the state. Nonetheless, unfortunately, we didn't strike on the opportunity to apply for the competitive grant for a multitude of reasons. Just moving money through the state at that scale, $5 million is just a little bit too much for us. And B, we're working off some appropriated legislative funds for a one-year pilot project, which should start whenever we get some signatures. So again, getting things signed off of the state does take some time, but we will be applying for the capacity grant. So I know, I'm not sure of the NOFO on that, if it'll be the same as the competitive, where you can only apply for one, apply as a lead for one application, but you can co-apply for multiple. So I think we would fall in that group of being the lead agent for one and applying as a co-applicant for the other. So other than that, just kicking off our Digital Navigator pilot program here in the city of Albuquerque. So we have 2 ACC members that'll oversee 20 libraries in Albuquerque. And it's been a couple good weeks of training. So I'll turn it over to Ann.
Hey everyone, my name is Ann Slaughter. I'm the Director of Technology Services at the Reaching Across Illinois Library System, or RAILS. We are funded by the Illinois State Library, which is a part of the Secretary of State's office here. And there are basically two of us in Illinois. So we serve libraries of all types in about half the state, doing a lot of the kind of on the ground work that the kind of work that Bo is doing at New Mexico State Library. So, within that, structure, 5 million starting point with the match is also just a scale that's sort of beyond us at the moment. So we are gearing up primarily for the state capacity grants, but we were named as a partner on a grant that the Illinois literacy, now I don't remember, the literacy arm of the Secretary of State and State Library. They applied to provide scholarships through libraries to the Career Online High School. If you're familiar with that, it is a not a GED, but similar. It issues a high school diploma to adults. So, hoping that goes well. We're just kind of an administrative partner on that. And got a lot of other work going on, including some legislative advocacy. And I'm actually next month chairing my first meeting as the Broadband Advisory Council chair for the state. So we have our hands in a lot of aspects of this. So anyways, that's us. And I know that there are a lot of people here who did apply for the competitive grants and that are also gearing up for additional opportunities like state capacity grants. So we sort of thought, we'd like to touch on kind of the full spectrum here, but I think it would make sense to focus first on capacity grant applications. I think anyone here who, we're all here because we want to know what everyone is up to. So, for anyone on the call who applied, please feel free to just unmute yourself and share about your project, about the process, anything that you'd like to share, and we'll keep it open-ended, and just have some free-form discussion, and Bo and I can toss in some questions as we go along. And I do see in the chat that we'd all like to hear more about ALA's application as well. So I don't know, Megan or Emily, if you guys want to kick it off.
Sure. And I see Michelle is here. Michelle, the opportunity is yours if you would like it. Otherwise, I can do my best. Okay. Okay, great. Well, thanks to a great team of ALA's public policy, or I'm sorry, we're the public policy, Public Library Association and Public Programs Office. We put in a huge grant application yesterday called Resourcing Libraries as Rural Digital Literacy Hubs. I believe we applied for nearly the $12 million with partners at COSLA, American Indian Library Association, ARSL, and then Cyber Seniors and Farm Worker Justice. The idea is to leverage ALA's Digital Learn platform, or PLA's Digital Learn platform, which is an existing kind of tool for digital literacy trainings, and to kind of build from there accessible trainings that can add capacity, especially to rural and tribal libraries. Let me see what else I can say about it. The goal is to reach about over 1 million people, 1.28, yeah, about 1.25 million people through the digital literacy trainings, one-to-one consultation, and asynchronous use of digital learn. We're hoping to have about $5 million flow directly to small and rural libraries. So we would be setting up kind of like a stipend and a community of practice. And we can talk more about what that looks like, I think, once everything gets off the ground, if everything gets off the ground. And then 100% of the funding devoted to serving rural communities. And then, of course, to scale and sustain that work in the field. So Partners would have all of the access, free access to that, and try to adapt them to non-library entities that work with rural communities, and to build upon what the initial cohort of libraries does and kind of scale and sustain beyond that to kind of have a lasting impact. Emily or Michelle, I don't know if I missed anything major. I hope I got the highlights there.
I have a follow-up question, Megan.
Sure.
What does a partnership with Cyber Seniors look like?
I think, yeah, Michelle maybe can answer that question.
It relates to skill sharing as well as resource sharing, and I'm not quite sure what there was one other piece, and I'm just blanking on it right now. But a sharing of resources and helping to build capacity. The one other thing I wanted to say was we're also, even though we're going to use the Digital Learn platform, what we also want to do is kind of leverage existing resources that already exist out in the digital literacy ecosystem, both made by libraries and not, but try to make them more accessible to libraries that need help kind of trying to figure out how to take that information and make it usable in a smaller scale in their community. So, you know, rural libraries don't have as many staff members as many suburban and urban libraries. And so what we're trying to do is help and provide capacity and support and experts that can help them take advantage of existing resources that are out there and identify what additional resources need to be available in order for them to take advantage of the opportunities. Bo?
Yeah, Ann and I were kind of discussing, you know, like time management, you know, trainings or something like that to kind of help, you know, facilitate digital equity in libraries. Is that kind of, it sounds like maybe it's touched on a little bit?
It could. We're going to do some assessment and you know, conversations and focus groups and identify what it is that they need. Not all the tools are going to be related specifically just to training, but also what are those other things that smaller rural libraries and tribal libraries need in order to be able to help spin up and or scale a digital literacy program in their community. And so, as you said, it could be a lot of different things that may not just be the materials on how to train, but also how do you have a community conversation? How do you work together in a smaller community to identify resources in order to work together in order to provide digital literacy training and support? So that could also be like one-on-one coaching or something else.
That does sound very, very similar to, you know, what Bo and I were talking about, and the ideas that we're developing here in Illinois with our partners, really focusing on the small rural libraries who really, really need capacity and don't have the capacity to apply for and manage their own grant funding, especially with this federal money.
Right. Well, and you know, when you only have a couple members on your staff, you also need other people you can talk to and share with and learn from each other and share, you know, lessons at work, but also share the mistakes that you made so that other people can make new mistakes and not keep making the same ones over and over again. So trying to build that kind of community that you can turn to, and when you don't necessarily have it because you're the size of this, you know, the people that you're working with just isn't very big.
Well, thanks so much for sharing all of that detail about the ALA effort. I hope it gets funded. It'll be great to see that in action. Any questions for the ALA folks before we, you know, mine the next person willing to share? All right, who else can share about the grants that, you know, if you applied or if you were named as a partner, what are you up to?
I'll quickly just share that we weren't named as a partner, but we did offer a support letter for our application. And should that applicant be awarded, I believe that we would definitely be in position to partner after the fact, even though we weren't a co-applicant directly on that application. So I would just say be mindful of those that are awarded and maybe take them out to dinner or something and figure out their plans. So I don't know.
At the Seattle Public Library, we did end up being a partner in a pretty large regional coalition of folks that was we partnered with it's being led, and the grant was written, the proposal was written by our regional workforce development council, because we partnered with them as well as with Seattle City IT, King County IT, like our surrounding networks, and a couple of CBOs that a lot of us had been working with to really propose several digital navigation kind of like workshops, access to hopefully like tools, access to kind of a pool of devices that could be kind of like this learn to earn model from workshops that would be hosted in library spaces, was kind of how we had conceptualized our plan. And the workshops being having an element of workforce development to them. So it would like make sense to be working with some of these other folks. So we wouldn't, the library ourselves wouldn't be getting any like specific funding, but we are listed as an official partner, since we would be providing some of the spaces and some of the staffing to make some of the workshops happen. We also, we thought about our in-kind donation piece actually being access to some of the resources that the Washington State Library gives to us, like LinkedIn Learning, like the North Star curriculum. So we structured it in that way, and we're really excited about the way that we've structured it. Even if we don't get the funding, we could use the kind of the way that we'd conceptualized working on it to do work together, even if we don't get the specific funding. But we also, so we're part of our regional group, our countywide group, but then also the Workforce Development Council for the state of Washington also went for some funding as well. So we're not an official partner in that application, but if they are successful, then the plan would be the way that we would work with our local WDC would be kind of the same way that we've identified in the other grant. So kind of excited to see what happens there, but it's also, yeah, it's been very interesting. The number of partners on it and the different ways that we thought about what libraries can or can't do as part of the partners. It's been really interesting. It's been a good experience.
Chris, I see your hand is up.
Hello. Hi, Bo. It's nice to see you again. At the University of Pittsburgh, we were the lead applicant for a coalition grant with 12 regional partners who will operate in 15 counties of Western Pennsylvania. And the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh was one of our partners. I don't want to really speak for them, but I know that because it's an ALA work group, that's what you're interested in. And what they're going to do is train they intend to train professional staff at each of the 53 county libraries of Allegheny County, which is where Pittsburgh is, in their headquarters. So they'll get about 163 library staff trained up in North Star. And then every library will have a copy of North Star. And then they'll use that staff to reach out into the community to invite them and and learning digital skills basics. And they anticipate touching 83,000 individuals over the 4-year period across those 53 locations. And then they'll shift as that training is underway. While that's going on with the public, the initial staff person who was hired to expand capacity will then shift towards the 12 partners on the grant and come into their environments and work with their constituents, specifically public housing sites and senior residences, to teach digital skills at those locations. There's also a workforce component that we hope will be funded to bring certified telecommunications training to individuals. And, you know, with 12 partners, we've got a whole host of other services that we anticipate being funded for Western Pennsylvania. And I have a whole lot to say about that grant that I won't get into now, but it was incredibly painful and difficult. We hired a grant writer for significant cost that is absolutely out of the reach of most small organizations, notwithstanding the evaluation demands and requirements. And even the scoring could only be fully realized by a major institution of one sort or another because of the merit scoring of match. So you're looking at 30% match on a $5 million grant is a lot of money for some organization to just have laying around to be able to donate. And we found out as a nonprofit, or I'm sorry, as an institute of higher education, nonprofit anchor institution, that we could not use unused overhead as match. So you literally needed to have that money available, or because the admin cap was 10%. So it was there's a lot of grievance, I think, rightly so. And I feel the pain of the organizations that struggled to meet the floor and of the organizations that simply didn't have the capacity at all. One of the things we hope we can do is to grow our award with foundation match, and then use a microloan program from those dollars to in turn fund the smaller nonprofits in our region who couldn't apply at all, so that they would have a resource to do their work and touch the populations that, you know, that they are focused on.
Anybody else want to add on to that point Chris just made?
I'll just jump in from Pennsylvania and say I'm so excited that this Pennsylvania regional grant happened. Our labor and industry also applied, including libraries as a possible partner to get digital North Star for across the Commonwealth where they could afford to provide it. So there's a lot of interesting, this whole process has been very interesting. PDE was also named in that grant for adult education libraries and PDE generally, so our Department of Education here. And then we had 2 other grants that we are named as a partner in as well. But I love what you guys are doing there. Sounds great. So it's good to hear. We're still waiting to get data from labor and industry who actually responded from our libraries, because we did some interest surveys for libraries and they haven't shared the data with us yet, but I know the grant is submitted. So interesting. Communication is key in these. And the big lesson I think we all should have learned is, wow, why didn't we all start this earlier? We knew this when the IIJA came out. Why didn't we have these things at the ready? That's the lesson I'm taking from all of this.
You know, Carrie, we learned so much from the 7-week collaborative process from our partners. and I've said it to our group, I'll say it to this group. If we don't get funded, it was still a success for us, as painful as the whole process was, because of how much learning we had and how much tighter the organizations that did finally become the participating group learn from one another. And I agree with you. Why couldn't our coalition have been that tight from the beginning? I don't know. I think that we're all interested in what we're doing. We've got our head to the ground and we're focusing on our work in front of us. But I encourage all of you nationally to get tight with a group for your region and coalition build and share. Just learning how much a digital navigator gets paid from group to group was illuminating. We're gonna settle around 50K for our region, but some groups are paying $100 an hour. And so the question is, well, why don't you FTE that individual and provide them with and then a lot of digital navigators came back to us and said, we don't know what we're doing. We're making this up as we go. All right, well, who's providing the resource kit for these individuals who are going out into the community? And what is we don't even know what their burnout rate is. We don't know what their lifespan is as a profession because it's new. We have to share, and we have to share regionally, because these calls are important for national, but each region is so different and unique. You know, if I was a digital navigator in a really rural state or, you know, South Dakota, maybe my burnout rate is different than a more urban, densely packed state because I'm driving 6 hours a day for calls, or, you know, the telehealth stuff would be all different that I'm training for, and all sorts of things that would make the mix totally different from one region to the next. I'll stop talking.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. I've been quiet on this call because I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm Don Michael. We're in a totally different situation that makes us almost invisible because our politics in North Carolina is pretty severe. So even though we have a grant office, and even though we have the ability to have participated in the grant process, we would have gotten the grant ready to go and sent it to our grant office, and somewhere through our special process here in North Carolina, it would never have been approved. And that's happened at least 2 or 3 times where grants have been written and they've been pretty much rejected. So I guess what I'm saying to you is that in terms of perspective, the idea is that if I go to apply for a grant, the system is working with me, whereas in other places, in other spaces, the grant system isn't working with us, it's working against us. And it's working against us because of the possibility of whatever the plans are with the 2025 project, you know. And I don't mean to offend anybody here, because I know that there are different librarians with different politics, but I'm just telling you the experience that we're having here with digital inclusion and that process. So we're still basically working as just librarians who are providing a service, and we're happy for everybody else. We hope you all get your grants. You know, it's the work is deserving, but I hope that when the dust clears and all the money clears, we can talk about the range of participation in this process and how some of us have been pretty much forgotten. So it sounded depressing, but it's true. So.
Hey, Don, I just have a follow-up question. Being that the capacity is a much smaller pot of money, more manageable, I guess, you know, easier targets. Do you think that the capacity grant is in that same boat in regards to like the process that it has to go through?
Yeah, I'm going to answer your question as succinct as I can. I think the grants themselves, what they're asking, you to ask to get the money. Everything's fine with that. What I guess what I'm trying to communicate is that it isn't the grant, it isn't the requirements of the grant, but that's perfect. We can handle that, right? It's the people who are creating a world and they want that world to be a certain way. The idea of changing a system that never puts any money towards student technology training, but has a system for faculty and has a system for staff, but an entire state that does not want to put money towards student technology training. They'll never tell you that. That's what we're up against. And down the road, the effects of that affecting the populations, women and minorities, by the way, at least that's what we surveyed before we just stopped surveying because it didn't matter what we showed them. Down the road, next 5 years, that's going to affect people in terms of their ability to get jobs and things. And you all know this, you're the choir. So that's what we're working on right now, is to try to counter the absence of support from VPs, provosts, and the grants office, and try to do the thing that we do as a librarians, is to counter that with just our own commitment, to the field.
Yeah, I know our state broadband office, I've heard that about 85% of the capacity dollars are going to flow to community organizations. So have you heard as to like how they plan to spend their capacity dollars?
You know what? I think our people are going to be lucky. We have a large digital literacy institution called the Center for Digital Equity. And they, believe it or not, and just telling the truth, this is not negative, they get something like $5 million already. They get money from the Knight Foundation. They got money flowing through there. And I think they have 30 employees, 35 employees or something like that. Can you imagine? This is digital literacy, right? But we're also we're in a culture where there can only be one. And so, and also we're also in a culture where no one ever thought about academic libraries. No one ever thought about librarians as being, technology trainers. There's a difference between, let's say, digital navigator and librarian who's a technology trainer, besides the degree. So all I'm asking is, in this very long, hopefully it's not a diatribe to you, is that when the dust settles, when we're asking about, so what did we do or what did we get from all of this? I hope we ask the question, was everybody served? And if they weren't served, how were they not served? And then that's when we should be, hopefully we'll have to tell the story about how the system, from a political point of view, worked against digital equity in some areas of this effort. And that somewhere, someone, just like when we had COVID, they have been negatively affected by the fact that they couldn't participate. Yep, I am. I am definitely on the spot. But how about this? It's like I am so happy for you all. I hope you feel that from me. I hope you get your grants. I hope you run and you make this happen. But we're gonna take care of ourselves on this, and I assure you. And then we're gonna be watching what you do with your grant monies, and hopefully we can learn something from that too.
And I'd like to propose a question off of the heels of Don and what he had to say in regards to, libraries are going to begin to take care of themselves. So, and it kind of points back to that initial question that I had earlier from Michelle. And the question is, do you have skill gaps on your staff? How are you addressing those? What needs do you think we have in library workforce and long term? So it's like a 3-part question, but maybe that's not a good question right now. Let me know if we should pivot in a different direction, but I'm just curious to know that.
it has come up in, I think, both of the, or all three of the projects that we've talked about is just the skill development for library staff being primary to the work that they're doing in their community. And the fact of the digital navigator model still needing to be road tested in so many ways, not to, pun not necessarily intended, but Chris talking specifically about digital navigators in rural areas, smaller libraries, testing the scale of the model, the workload, the day-to-day. So it's not an irrelevant question.
Yeah, I pose that question because this is our second week in libraries, and here we are. I'm in a library now, and unfortunately, I couldn't meet with the library manager here, but I kind of threw our digital navigators at the wolves to talk to him, and he had so much pushback as to like, well, I don't want him interfering with my day-to-day operations, and it was just a lot of pushback. So as we're like trying to like build this plane as we fly this digital navigator model, and I think it's great because we only have 2 digital navigators per Albuquerque, which is 20 libraries. So we're going to have to take a different path to how we facilitate one-on-one tech support and facilitate classes and facilitate focus groups. And ultimately, I would just love for them to write a freaking report that, drills down on the need for added capacity, added focus, for tech-based services in libraries. So.
All right,
Yeah,
we've
I
got a
just
couple. Oh, sorry, all right, James, you can go ahead, and then Liz and Michelle both had their hands up.
I'm sorry, let them go first then.
All right, Michelle.
James, you always have good things to say, please.
All right, well, give me just a moment. Yeah, what's interesting to note is that the Institute of Museum and Library Services, where I work, has been trying to inculcate and forge ahead with the idea that digital navigator models, digital inclusion, and digital equity work in libraries has to be core and central to library services. And far too often, I'm still seeing cases where you do get the pushback, well, we already asked to do so much, but this is not other work. This is work that has to be done. And we are starting to see a few more applications, and hopefully in the next fiscal year, we'll make some grants to some libraries that will feature and focus on digital skills training and digital literacy training for librarians themselves, with the hopes that they'll be able to assist their communities. So there is hope. Thanks.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. I mean, I think that these programs that are, happening in libraries already succeed when there's someone really passionate there that's driving it and pushing it. And then the second that person burns out or leaves, it's gone. The program dies out. No matter how well it was structured and no matter how great and stable the funding is, it's just, if there's not someone that's really enthusiastic that's pushing it, it's gonna fade out and eventually go away. And so I totally agree. I think it needs to be core. I think in the same way that we recognize that like cataloging is core to what we're doing, maintaining a collection is core to what we're doing. We don't all have to be collection development librarians or catalogers, but we all recognize it's part of what we're doing. It's one of those like skills you learn in library school, at least a little bit. And there's a sense of like, it's part of the big picture of what we're all doing. And so I think digital inclusion or digital equity related training for librarians should be on those terms, this sense of like, you need to understand why this is important and how it's part of our overall services. And if you've got to step in and cover the desk or cover the digital navigator, fine, you can do that for an hour, but you don't have to be an expert on it yourself, but you also do have to acknowledge this is part of our profession.
Yeah, and the idea of sustainability being beyond funding and facilities, organizational structure and strategy. That's such an important point, Liz. All right, Michelle, you've had your hand up for a little bit, and then Chelsea. You're muted, Michelle.
Sorry, I had it on and then off, the dog was barking. So I'm gonna take my ALA hat off and put my head of technology hat on. I used, for the last 20 years, I've worked as a technology leader in multiple different types of libraries. And the one thing that I want to say is I think it's important to teach digital skills for our library staff. There are, every staff I've worked with, every library I've worked at, it's been a variety of different skill sets. You have the really techie people to the people who are like, I don't want to use it and resent the fact that I need to use a computer in order to do what I'm doing, that kind of thing, or I'll do what I have to do, but I don't want to learn anything more. But what I would like to say is I'm hoping that in addition to teaching digital skills, that we're teaching people how to be learners, that our technology is evolving at a quick and rapid pace. I just remember, like the thing that kind of was like this aha moment I had with staff one time when I was doing a technology training is I had put together materials. Everything had worked at midnight the night before. I went and taught the class at 9 o'clock in the morning. My handouts were useless. The entire website had changed. The vendor hadn't put a notice out. They didn't think that their changes were that significant, but nothing I had worked. So as a class, we ended up actually working together in order to learn how to use this tool, which I think was it was a learning moment for all of us on how to do this. And then they understood why, when I wasn't really teaching step by step how to always do things, but actually how to take a mindset of experimentation and learning. And I had one other word, which I've just totally lost. But and you have to be okay with going down this path of ambiguity and hoping that you'll get out on the other side. And so as we think about this work that we're doing, I think digital navigators are great. When I worked at Chicago Public, we had kind of, I think, like the early thing of what we called cyber navigators, which wasn't quite as robust, but again, this, was started in the late 1990s. So in early 2000s, but it was this thing that allowed us to offer these skills, but it was also really important. The digital navigator can't be there all the time, and staff need to be able to feel comfortable and confident with the ambiguity that comes along with helping people learn and be able to use technologies to achieve their goals.
Go for it, Chelsea. I see your hand up.
Do I know how to put it down? Oh, there it is. Yeah, so I'm Chelsea Kirkland with DC Public Library, Digital Inclusion Coordinator, and we have a small core of digital navigators, and we've been on for about 2 years doing originally ARPA funded, and it's been really interesting to see how to sort of what y'all were talking about, how the staff has sort of integrated into the branch staff. Like we're never going to have enough digital navigators to provide coverage at all of the locations. And there's always that tension between like their job and like regular desk staff job and, that back and forth. And so we're looking at different ways that we can, like what that might look like moving forward. Is it a special shift, like a desk shift where people can focus on it? And what would the training be required to do that? Like, I almost feel like at this point for us, having the staff and myself who are all grant funded, that focus on it, and almost the main value is like providing space to really think about what the instruction looks like inside and like develop best practices that we can then share out with other staff. One of the main things, we were part of going back to the grant application, we were part of a bigger regional grant. And one of the things that we were just kind of like tapped to sign on to something that these other organizations were doing. But one of the things that was really interesting to me is there being embedded digital navigators at these small CBOs, and how maybe we could provide some leadership around like training people up and having like a cohort. So those are the types of things that I think it's kind of like, it needs to be better integrated into the work that we do. And I think that something like just like having this space now to think these things through, because we have people whose full job are dedicated to it, I think is helpful. But I can't imagine expanding it out in a sustainable way where it's still a completely different job from the rest of the library staff, to all y'all's points. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, I think we might be at time. Megan, Emily, this conversation has been so wonderful and valuable. Michelle.
I want to just make one point, and I'm sorry because Chris is off the line, but he said something like, "Why didn't we all think about working together sooner?" And so while the competitive grant has, the application has come in, remember that the capacity grants for the states are coming. The states have submitted the plans that they want to use to run the grant programs. They're slowly being approved by NTIA. And so then those plans will be implemented and the grant programs will be introduced at the state level. And granted, each state's going to do it differently, so I can't give you guidance on how to do it, but start thinking now, start reaching out to your community members and start planning so that you have those relationships in place, that you have those coalitions, the relationships, the friendships, and you can identify what it is that you want to do together in order to then apply and take advantage of this funding. And so, this was one step. This isn't the last step. There's many more to go, and there's still a lot more opportunities for all of us to still look to our networks, whether it's locally or regionally or across the state, and how we're going to work together in order to achieve our digital equity goals for our local communities.
To quickly piggyback off of what Michelle said, as far as the capacity grant, I know for Native entities, that application opens tomorrow, the 25th, and I think it closes in February of 25. So that's a good amount of time for those that are working with tribal communities. And, Michelle, you just dropped a bomb in here, which was teaching people how to be learners. I love that. And that's something I can take forward, as I work directly with librarians on a daily. So just thanks.
I'd argue that all of the, well, not all, will not be too sweeping, but the upcoming state level opportunities and the programs that PLA is doing with the incentives, outside of this federal competitive grant, the scale is much more attainable to individual library organizations. Oh, great about National Skills Coalition. Michelle, there's lots of good stuff in the chat, everyone. So hit the save button there with the 3 dots if you want to save it. We better turn it back to ALA staff so we can wrap this up.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you both. Thanks so much. And for everyone for participating in this conversation. This was a really good conversation. Let's keep it going, next month and beyond. Come to the Hotspots webinar tomorrow if that interests you, and hope to see many of you at Shelby and then again next month online. Thanks so much. We'll keep the line open if anyone wants to chat for a moment, but otherwise have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Emily and Megan. This was good.
Anne.